Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Orange County Historical Society. I'll thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Chris Jepson. I am the current president of the Orange County Historical Society. And had a few announcements here tonight to start out with. First of all, if you don't have a, if you want to come up closer to the front, there are a few scattered seats up here. There's one at that table. There's one at this table. There's two at this table. I think there's one there. So if you have any trouble hearing or would like to come up closer to the front just because you want a better view of the slides or whatever, come on down. It's proven the students who sit at the front get the better grades. I also wanted to point out we have a bunch of different tables around here. It's like a progressive dinner of local history here. We have one table over there against that wall has a handful of free books. They're relatively common ones, but it may be new to you, so you might want to check that out. And then for the better stuff, go to the back table there with Aida. And we have a whole lot of different publications, including a couple that haven't been seen for a while. One I have never seen before. It's a rare two-pager on citrus in Orange County from Leo Fries. And we have sold out all of the copies we had. We keep bringing more and more each meeting of Fries' Orange County Through 4 Centuries, which is a great starting place, as I've said, for an overview of Orange County history. And we've sold out the last two meetings. We have more now.
Not today, we'll have that next.
Sorry, next meeting. Oh, hey. So something to look forward to. And then our speaker tonight, Paul Spitzzeri, has been kind enough to bring a whole lot of really cool artifacts and postcards and other materials relating to his talk tonight and to La Vida Hot Springs. So we have those going, and then of course at the end of the meeting we always have our goodie table at the back, and we hope you'll help yourself to refreshments and back there afterward. Wanted to run down some of our upcoming meetings. Next month, April 11th, Eric Plunkett will be back to talk about colorful tales and trails of the Santa Ana Mountains. Yes, that is a correct reaction, both because of the topic and because of the speaker. On May 9th, Patricia Prestonari will be here to talk about the treasures of Cal State Fullerton's archives and special collections. And so we're happy to see to be able to shine some light on all the wonderful stuff they have there. So looking forward to that. June 13th, Dr. Benjamin Jenkins will be here from University of La Verne to talk about how railroads and citrus transformed Southern California. So two popular topics in one. And then we take the summer off. And then we will come back and start our new season on September 12th with noted cultural anthropologist and archaeologist Stephen O'Neill will be here. And so all stuff to look forward to. As far as other things coming up here shortly on our events, we have Judge Pleasant's 185th birthday celebration. It is, I believe, are we booked up entirely at this point? Yeah, we are completely booked on that one. But if you have already signed up for that event, the confirmations will be going out tomorrow. So we haven't forgotten about you, but watch your email tomorrow. And then as for our history hike to Flores Peak on Saturday, April 20th, I think we are still taking people for that at this point. We still have some openings for that. It's going to be, again, historian Eric Plunkett is going to be leading a hike to the top of Flores Peak at the beautiful confluence of Harding and Majeska Canyons Flores Peak rises 1,834 feet tall and is named for notorious criminal Juan Flores. In 1857, Flores and his gang killed Sheriff James Barton and 3 deputies and hid out on top of this peak. It is an incredible story that includes Flores' escape down the steep cliff of Flores Peak on horseback and his eventual capture by the posse. The route is 1.5 miles in length with an elevation gain of 465 feet, and it is a strenuous climb. The entire hike should take about 2.5 hours, including the historical interpretation at the top of the mountain. So it should be a great event, and I hope some of you will be able to join us for that.
What's the date?
It again is April 20th, and we meet at the trailhead at 8:30 a.m. So if you are interested in that event, please do, and if you want to sign up for it, go to our website at orangecountyhistory.org, and you can learn all about the event and and you can sign up right there. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker, no stranger to the Orange County Historical Society. Born in Chicago and raised in Orange County, and with a BA and MA in history from Cal State Fullerton, Paul R. Spitzzeri is museum director at the Workman and Temple Family Homestead Museum, where he has been since 1988. In addition to writing extensively about greater Los Angeles history, Paul, a resident of Carbon Canyon, has delved deeply into the history of the canyon over the last 20 years and maintains the Carbon Canyon Chronicle blog, which I encourage you all to look up and read, because there's so much there. Great stuff. Paul?
Thanks a lot, Larry. All right, good evening. So those of you who are going on that hike, you will be getting naturally high on 420. So that's good to know. You like that? That's a good start? Okay. Incidentally, I am doing a talk at the Sherman Library next Tuesday on that Barton massacre. So if you want to check that out, they do charge, but I'll be doing that as well. And thanks a lot, Chris, for the invitation. Great to be here. So this quote comes from an advertisement, Miraculous, Curative Wonder Water. Did it work that way? Who knows? But let's talk about Vida Mineral Springs out in Carbon Canyon. Assuming, there we go. All right, so it's one of those places where it's a hidden remnant. There's not very much there. This is this afternoon at 2 o'clock. That's my car down there. Kind of getting an idea of what's going on. Those trees are remnants. They were there from early days. You'll probably see them in some of the images out here. You might notice that Carbon Canyon Road has drivers who don't often stay between the lines. The fence is getting, I don't know how that happens, but it gets knocked down over there. So there are things, sidewalks and what have you, and the creek that runs through that area, that's of course been there since time immemorial. But it's always kind of cool to see what places look like many, many years later. So there's a little bit of a sidewalk, and you'll see that in some of the images that I'll show you later on. Now, one big part of this that's still here, and before 2008, there was a very massive fire, a lot of you will remember that, the freeway complex, that tore through this area. And one of the things that it did is it exposed this water tower, or water tank, pardon me, that's on the hill. And then people started going out and expressing their social protest on that. So it's a little less obvious now when you drive by, but that also is a remnant. And in that canyon behind that, which is called La Vida Canyon, water still comes out of there. You're not supposed to go back there, it's private property. So I'm telling you not to go back there. Do not go back there. None of you should go back there and check that out, because people are watching. Now, mineral springs are as old as human beings discovered things come out of the ground that freaked them out. They didn't know where that came from and was that sacred and all that kind of stuff. And so there's plenty to read about that. But you can go to ancient times and see how hot springs and mineral springs were used in modern times, especially big in places like Europe, Japan, many parts of the world. So just a little bit of context for this. And locally you have places like Murrieta. I stole this image off of Orange County History Land. So the late, great Phil Brigandy and Chris and Eric and others who are carrying that work forward. But obviously a lot of those in our local area because we have the geology for that. And so, it's, again, some of the context behind what's going on here. And when it comes to La Vida, one of the things to think about is who are going to be a lot of the patrons of a place like this, especially when you got a lot of Jewish migration to Los Angeles in the early 19th century, and there's a lot of use of mineral springs by people of that faith. That's why you see the Star of David on the Miraculous Hot Springs building over there, for example. And in Carbon Canyon, there was a camp set up by the Workman Circle, a very left-leaning socialist group. In 1928, they established a child's camp and an adult camp. So I think they felt like there was a way to be able to have both of these places be something they could use, not too far from Los Angeles, but far enough out in the country, obviously back in those days, to enjoy the recreation of the canyon. One of the big things that's going to help this become developed is the building of Carbon Canyon Road. And before I get too much further along, it's unfortunate that we don't have any information that I know of about indigenous people, whether they use this hot springs. It wouldn't surprise me if they were obviously very aware of that, would have used that. So as far as the documentation goes, you're kind of going into the 1910s. It has been said in some sources that oil workers in the Olinda oil field, which started in 1897, some people happen to know about that in this room over here. So Chris Farron's at the Olinda Oil Museum can tell you all about that. But that's some of the stories, is that these guys are working really hard and they discovered this area. They go back there and to help relax their tired muscles and that sort of thing. But this is an Orange County newspaper article from 1914, and I highlighted the part on the bottom where it says, the much discussed Olinda to Chino Road seems likely to be built soon. It is known as the Carbon Canyon Road. And of course, the name carbon itself tells you a little bit about the geology. There were people who took out mining claims for coal out there. Didn't find any, but there was other stuff coming along later on. The road did get built in 1914 and 15. It was all dirt, so you can imagine what happened the first winter, right? And then the one after that and what have you. So it was a little bit treacherous to go through the canyon until they paved it fully in the very late 1920s. But early on, this is from the Register, Santa Ana Register, at the end of July 1915, that there was belief in the medicinal value of hot water, which flows from the La Vida hot springs 3 miles north of Olinda, which sounds kind of weird. This is 3 miles north of Olinda, to have a guy and his son decide to make improvements, including the building of a 20-room hotel in the fall. That did not happen at that time. It was a little bit later. But it said the hostelry would be equipped with a large dance hall and restaurant, and it is likely that Abbott and Son, and I'll talk about Abbott in a little bit, will incorporate for $50,000. The waters of the spring are reported efficacious, there's your word for the day, please use that tomorrow, in the cure of rheumatism and other diseases. Now, I had done this Carbon Canyon Chronicle blog from 2008. I had written a little about La Vida, some of it inaccurate. We do that sometimes in history, and then we learn and we hopefully change our ways. But one of the things I had pointed out was some of the early stuff, but a young man got a hold of me who said, well, my grandfather was manager out there in the last half of the 1910s, James Williams. And so Nick, the grandson, sent me a couple of photographs. That's always great. It's one of the best things about what we do, right? When people reach out to you, you've got a personal connection to this. So what you see on the left there is a little house that the family constructed on the south side of Carbon Canyon Road. There are actually little steps that are still visible. I'm not going to tell you where they are because if you try to go find those, you will get run over. There is no shoulder there, and people drive like maniacs through the canyon. But that's where that photo was taken. She's pointing to something on that piece of wood. I'm not sure what it is. I don't think it matters for our purposes. And then the gentleman in the back, second to the right, is James Williams, who was the manager for 4 years until he died young. I don't know of what, but early history there. And it was really cool, again, to be able to get that connection from a direct descendant. Now, Abbott, as I referred to before, is Alan Abbott and his father. Alan was, in this 1920 census listing, I highlighted it, manager La Vida Springs. And he lived very close to a guy named Edward Gaines. Gaines had a ranch called the Flying Cow. I'm not sure why it was called that, other than maybe some automobiles got through. Who knows for sure. Or he had magic cows, that's possible too, maybe on 420. But in any case, what Abbott did was he ran this probably on behalf of Gaines because he was his nephew. And so sometimes you get those family connections going on back then. There was a place called Clearwater. Most of you have not heard of that, but Clearwater is now the city of Paramount. And Gaines came from there, and others who had Carbon Canyon interests. Anaheim will also be a kind of an important place for Carbon Canyon for obvious reasons. It's pretty close by. So there's an early photograph from about 1920. That's that little house on the right side. You can see the beautifully maintained Carbon Canyon Road there, all dirt. On the left are, I think, some of those eucalyptus trees that are still with us. So it's kind of a neat deal. One of the earliest photographs I've seen of that area, and you can see a flivver back there on the bottom left. Another reference to the Abbott family on a short vacation and trip to La Vida Hot Springs near Fullerton. Brea did exist, but it was called Fullerton. In fact, they called it the Fullerton Oil District, for that matter. And so it's just some early references to what was going on out there. And not surprisingly, somehow during Prohibition, people find these canyons, and they find it convenient to be able to use those so they can make their bootleg liquor. So this is an article, I think, from the Register in 1922 about a couple gentlemen, Harry Green of Brea and T.E. Rader of Placentia. I always knew those cities were not always on the up and up. I lived in Placentia for quite a while, I guess I can say that. But what's great about this is they even talk about how they got arrested and things that were said. So on the right side it says these guys were picked up, and one of the officers said, "Hello, Ballard." Oh, no, one of the guys, "Hello, Ballard." It was Green. And then they got to the dance hall, and they were talking about fooling the sleuths by ditching their stock and all of that, and they were overheard, and they got nabbed. So criminals aren't always the smartest when it comes to things like that, right? It's like robbing a bank and having your business card, and you write on the back, "Hand over my $10,000, whatever it is. La Vida gets spelled many different ways. So you see on the left, there's this La Vida with an E in it. I like snappy music by Curly Hurd on the piano. So you can imagine this little thing over here in the dance hall, and they're playing snappy music circa 1922. Or you have the Motorcraft of the Orange County Automobile Trade Association. It wasn't that much further back when you didn't have cars at all. You think maybe 20 years before this happened. The meeting place is at La Vida Springs, L-I-V-I-T-A. So we have all kinds of spellings for this. And the proprietors of the Anaheim Auto Paint Shop are the hosts. I guess you could say they were painting the resort red. Oh, there's another good one for you. At the bottom it says, the Canyon Resort is a new point to many Orange County dealers because they want to sell cars to folks who want to go out and have nice pleasure drives in many places. And so a real home-cooked chicken dinner also being part of this event. Thanks to Phil Brigandy, he dug this up as he was wont to do on occasion, an application for a license to La Vida Springs for a dance hall, and it talks about 160 acres of deeded land. 160 acres is pretty common. That's a quarter of a section, so you're buying public land. By the way, that area was not part of a rancho. It was public land set aside for grazing back in the Mexican and Spanish periods. But it gives you the names of the owners, Birkenstock, Blattner, Fred Klein, a guy named Charles Price, who probably owned a lot of the land out in that area even before that. And then it says Pugh and Miller, and I'll be talking about that just in a little bit. But it was really great to have Phil be able to find this and then forward it over to me. And in the newspaper a month later, there is an article actually talking about that. The La Vida Springs Carbon Canyon Resort is slated to become a haven for pleasure seekers. A corporation's been created. And there will be a hotel, it said, entirely modern, swimming pool, and a bathhouse will be comfortably designed. I wondered about that. What does that mean? Does the architect feel comfortable as he's writing out the plans for this? And the pool will be of large dimensions. The dance hall will be patterned after the most up-to-date halls of the terpsichore. There's another word for you, terpsichore. And a good orchestra will be secured on contract. A lot of cities did not want to give dance hall licenses out for obvious reasons, because they're not just serving ginger ale and root beer, right? There's other things going on there. But they did actually embark on this. The La Vida Springs Company really did create a lot of the modern facilities out here. Pugh and Miller was a firm that was created by two gentlemen, Solly Pugh and William Newton Miller. And Miller had an oil background. He was an oil field worker, but he got together with this guy and they created a drilling company. They did a ton of work, drilling oil wells all over Southern California, Central California, and other places. And they obviously did quite well. Miller is at the bottom of this, not bottom, middle of the 1930 census. By the way, if you do census research, this is about the most neatly written census page you're ever going to see. That was fantastic, and no deciphering whatsoever. But what they would show in these censuses is how much the value of your house was self-declared. And he had just moved several years before from one part of Anaheim to another, and he bought a craftsman-style home, still there, that was considered one of the finest in Orange County. So he had gone a long way in 10 years. But that was the roaring 20s. And for some people, it worked out until 1929. That's a whole other thing. But in any case, Miller starts to become a lot more involved, and he becomes the sole owner, eventually, of La Vida. And he and his family ran it for 60 years, somewhere along those lines. Well, 50, probably more like 50. I'm going to point over to this instead of the screen. That will probably help. Another great early event, the Masons of Los Angeles County. We don't see as many of these folks anymore as we used to, but I like these names. The Fullerton Pyramid, the Santa Ana Pyramid of the ancient Egyptian order of CSU, I think that's how it's pronounced. So these kind of crazy groups that were around back then. Dinner at 7 o'clock, dancing to follow with a large orchestra. 400 to 500 people showing up to this resort, which is a pretty big deal in 1925. I don't know where they parked all the cars for that. Many of whom coming from Long Beach, Los Angeles, Glendale, and other Southern California points. Pretty cool stuff to see. I came across this by accident. It doesn't relate to La Vida specifically, but it's a poem. And I thought it was pretty cool. So I'm going to read you a little bit of this poem. Carbon Canyon at Night. You ready? Tall peaks strive upward to a star-hung sky, heavy with all the majesty of night. Strange, dusky shadows on the hillside lie, made all the darker by the faint starlight. Shut in by hills close pressing all around, a group of slender eucalyptus trees. Actually, maybe that is La Vida. Drop leaves which flutter to the pulsing ground, borne by the messenger, a vagrant breeze. I'm going to go to the end. What is that freedom that you each would see, could you but know the blessed sweet content of star-filled skies so eloquent of peace? You'd linger on and count your days well spent, nor seek to taste the torture of release. That's actually pretty good. It's a little depressing at the end, the torture of release, but so there's the official poem of Carbon Canyon. I've just announced that for everybody's benefit. There could be problems though. For example, it rains sometimes, really, really hard, kind of like a little bit this year. So 1922, there was major flooding. 1927, we haven't gotten to 1938 yet, that's the worst one of all. But in 1927, pretty significant, all through greater Los Angeles, a lot of damage done. So newspaper articles about bridges, 2 bridges out between Olinda and La Vida Springs. And Chris can probably verify this to me, but the road didn't climb along the side of the hill like it does now. You followed the riverbed and crossed over, I think, twice, right? So that's a bit of a problem because you have 2 creeks, Soquel Canyon and Carbon Canyon coming together at that point. And said it'll be out of commission for residents in the canyon. On the bottom right, the road was closed, and it says all of the small houses at La Vida Hot Springs were washed away. Although at last reports, the dance hall was said to be intact. See? That's why it's important to have these licenses. But this also spurred a lot of talk, further talk, about what needed to be done about flood control. And they were talking about a dam in Carbon Canyon back in the 1920s. It didn't happen until the end of the 1950s. We had a few things happen, like the Depression and World War II and all of that. But very few people know that there was a plan when they were going to bring the water from the Colorado Aqueduct. There was a serious plan to put a dam about 200 feet from my house on the county line, a massive dam, and then backfill Canyon Hills Golf Course, and if you know that area back there, they were going to put a big, massive reservoir in Carbon Canyon. That was the plan in 1930. They changed their mind, and they decided to do other things like Pudding Stone Reservoir and what have you. But that would have been quite interesting to see a massive dam in Carbon Canyon. And of course, that would have ruined La Vida for sure. All right, as you go on, one of the ideas that came up in the late 1920s was to take some of the water and bottle it. So I've got a few bottles over there from over the years and one of the wooden containers that you would carry these things in. And so the article on the left is from the Pomona Bulletin in 1927. And it says, in order that Pomona people, only them, may become familiar with the merits of the water, so-and-so is going to be a distributor. And that bottle will be in 5-gallon containers ready for distribution. Its chemical qualities are said to be beneficial in relief of many ailments. On the right is a photograph from UCI Special Collections. A gentleman named Edward Cochins took a lot of photographs in many areas, including here. So that's where you see the water dripping out of a pipe there. And again, do not go back into that canyon. I forbid you to go back there and check that out. 1928 in the register. Do not be deceived. Beware of imposters. Imposters have an E at the end? I'm not sure. Anyway, demand Vida mineral water. What's it good for? Gas. Providing it. Stomach, liver, bladder, and kidney trouble, indigestion, rheumatism, neuritis, bad circulation, auto intoxication. It'd be anti-intoxication too. You're not drinking alcohol, right? Gravel stones. That's a weird one. You're picking up gravel and nervousness and sick headache. Not just headache, sick headache. Very important. And it goes on to talk about 50 cents a quart, $2 a gallon, $10 for 5 gallons. And the Vida Mineral Water Company, incorporated for $500,000, has thousands of customers, they claimed. And it is the health and curative wonder water throughout the United States. So that's where I pulled that title for this thing. The headquarters was on 2nd Street and Figueroa in Bunker Hill in Los Angeles. But they had a plant on site. They had a plant and office in Fullerton at different points. I like the bottom. La Vida Fizz. Say that 10 times fast. La Vida Fizz. Sold at all fountains. Okay. More advertisements in the late 20s. So on the left, swamped with orders, the talk of Los Angeles, La Vida, eliminates, counteracts, and neutralizes excess acid in the system, which is the direct or indirect cause, I like that, of most ailments and physical disorders. La Vida is a monopoly and has no competition. Don't forget that in a few minutes. And Dr. W.E. Fitch, very small type there, America's greatest authority. In what? It doesn't even say. Who's Dr. W.E. Fitch? But they also have Dr. H. somebody, celebrated physician and one of the greatest medical authorities in France, who has just written from there and said, La Vida mineral water is certainly an excellent mineral water, very active and agreeable to drink. It's recommended for the stomach, liver, and biliary canals, so it is wholly comparable to the celebrated France Vichy water. Of course, he's got to throw that in there, and so forth. They even had programs. You would pay to be able to be a sponsor, and they could have a little bit of time to promote their products on KFWB. Still around, right? That's pretty cool. All right. Okay, I think I need to go over and say, nice projector. Nice, nice, nice. There we go. Great Depression comes along, 1929, and then gets really bad in 1932. Things are a little bit tough sometimes. So on the bottom left, it says that a couple of attorneys have brought suit against the Vida Mineral Springs company, asking for $3,000 in costs because they've been owed money for 2.5 years. $3,000 is a lot of money in 1929, for sure. But they're still around, so in the early 30s, there's an advertisement. You can see Marietta, pretty famous. Gilman, some of you might have heard of. Warner, another well-known one, and there's La Vida in the middle of that as well. Hotel, cabin, or cottage accommodations. You'll see some photos at the end about that. Delicious meals prepared in sanitary kitchen. Well, I would hope so. What would be the alternative to that? Natural hot soda water baths, complete health treatments, and massages. So there was additional things going on. And again, if a lot of the customers are Jews from Los Angeles, they're looking for things like that because they would be found in resorts in Europe or in Eastern United States, those kinds of places. So you had the water company. You could buy stock in that. I don't know how this person did with their investment. It's Charles or Lulu Ross. I like that. Charles or Lulu. Maybe they were thinking ahead to a possible divorce. Who knows? But there's your stock certificate. And the water was pretty heavily promoted. And so a lot of these advertisements, I like the one in the middle. It says, an important message to those who are ill, buy the health man. I don't even see a name for this person, so that's pretty convenient. You can explain all this stuff and no one knows who you are. Free special offer. We'll send 1 gallon of a sample bottle to your home for free. Just write us and you will have all these things cured. Your digestive problems, rheumatic trouble, kidney and liver ills, and so forth. But legal problems continue. $105,000 suit filed against the company concerning stock, and then the company countersues for malicious prosecution and all of that. I didn't find what the result of that was. But on the right is an interesting one. How many of you knew Hawaiian Punch started in Fullerton, California? Right? Okay, some of you do. Trish, you knew that? That's amazing. I don't know how you knew that. But Levita had Levita Hawaiian Punch. So guess what happened to them? They got sued by the Fullerton guys. It was known as Leo's Hawaiian Punch originally. So they had to basically change the name. I think they changed it to Levita Punch. That's pretty hard. Take out Hawaiian and you're good. So this is late 1930s, but they're still around, still functioning. Once in a while, you'll get lucky and find a detailed description of a business like this. So this is from the Anaheim Bulletin in 1941. And it talks about that the Mineral Springs is bidding for world fame, which I thought was pretty interesting. Men go fishing and find gold, and men search for gold and catch fish. But when they drill for oil and strike a fortune in soda pop, it's another one for the books. So Miller obviously had an interest in oil because of his background, and that's probably why he was looking at that area and wouldn't find that, but would find the mineral springs. But he's credited for discovering the springs, and that was not the case. The native peoples probably discovered the springs. Others owned it before he got there, but by 1941, no one's going to know that probably. And so there he is. By the way, it says on the bottom right, more important because of the present world crisis is the fact that Nazi occupation of Europe has closed down exports from the famous Celestine Vichy mineral springs. So that doctor earlier talking about how comparable it is doesn't have a job because you've got France being occupied by the Nazis. This article, December 4th, 1941. So there would be no world fame for Miller because we're going to be entering the war within a very short period of time. More descriptions about it. The curative powers. How many millions of bottles have been prepared and sold, and all that. The chemist talking about the 22 different ingredients that will help you with your health needs and all of that. And it's kind of hard to see, but an image showing somebody at the bottling plant with a wooden barrel, wooden box, not unlike the one that's on the table, that kind of stuff. You start seeing promotional postcards and photos probably from the early 30s in bigger numbers. This is actually 1948. It shows a couple guys playing badminton by the bathhouse and hotel, which is pretty cool. The cafe was a pretty early thing as well. That was one of the last things to stand at the resort after much of it was gone. Look at the great 1940s cars there. And again, some of those trees that I think may still be there on the left, if I have my bearings correctly. A bridge going from where the bathhouse and some of the cottages were across Carbon Canyon Creek towards the hotel and bathhouse. And you can see a photo of that on the left there. Again, these are probably in the 40s. When you get into World War II, Miller is being assisted by his daughter and her husband, so it's still a family business. These are a couple of great ads for dining at La Vida Mineral Springs Cafe. $1.35 for your southern fried chicken dinner, or come on Christmas Day. There'll be a party with a large party room and all that, with a great 1950s style to it, if you like that kind of stuff. Another great feature came in 1960 from the Bulletin. This was an auto tour. So it kind of harkens back to that auto thing in 1922 or whatever it was, different generations. There is William Newton Miller, who was probably in his late 70s by that point, standing by a new car. In the background is that same building that we just saw. If I can go back to that. Right? I think that's the same thing. And so there's a lengthy description of this tour, and you start and go through Carbon Canyon. You could go loop around the backside, come through Brea Canyon, or go down through Santa Ana Canyon, those sorts of things. I didn't bring it with me, but there was an auto club map from the 1920s that showed La Vida as part of an auto tour you could do of Carbon and Brea Canyons from Los Angeles. Some other great photos of cars parked out on the property. Pretty cool to see that kind of stuff. There were a ton of these chromo postcards that were produced in the 1960s. They're just fun to see how the decor was, right? This is the restaurant, probably different eras, or just the color was off on the way they produced these, but those are fun. They had multiple facilities by the 60s. This is actually on an elevated part of the property. If you drive through, well, maybe you want to stop first. If you stop and look across, you can see the flattened area, and there's some pipes still running down. So the bottom photograph is looking east towards Chino and Chino Hills. And they had these pools and those really cool plastic chairs, the dressing rooms and all that, the umbrellas. Really fun stuff. A fountain in the middle of that. So a lot of investment being made during that period. There is your hotel that has been seen in other images. And again, look at the colors, the carpet, the spreads. There's your modern TV, 18 inches or whatever it would be back in those days. But I have a key to the hotel room that a neighbor gave to me. And I had some questions for her about how she got the key and why she took it with her. But she did not reveal. And inside the bathhouse, you can see the tubs and all that. When you go back to the early days, it was like concrete tubs in the ground and open, and you just sat in them. And then they would put a little rough wooden cover over it. So the advancements over time are pretty significant. But look at those yellow chairs. A lot of us remember those. They were very common. The ones over here by the bar or whatever, in your changing rooms and what have you. A lot of things are going to change, obviously, post-World War II. Tons of people coming out to Orange County, orange groves, going away, houses, shopping centers, schools, and all that. And this was no longer a retreat out in a rural area. It was being impinged upon, if you want to call it that, by suburbia. So there was a definite decline in the use of the facility. I think it was 1972, 3, somewhere in that period when the family finally sold it to a Japanese investor. And I don't know if he's still living, but he has owned the property for many decades. And it wasn't that long ago that there was advertising or promotion of this property for sale with an idea of how to revitalize this as a Mineral Springs again. And I'm talking the last 10 years. I don't think that's ever going to happen because I can see the bureaucratic nightmare of doing this. Who's going to want to wait in line on a Friday night at 5:30 to get to the resort for 45 minutes or an hour, that kind of stuff. But it was already having trouble in the 1980s, and then one of the big blows was a fire that broke out at the hotel, the motel. A friend of mine who lives in Olinda Village gave me these photographs to share, and so you can see the damage that was being done in this very, very old building. And so what basically was left was what a lot of us knew as the Roadhouse back in the 90s and early 2000s. Chris and I were talking about punk bands were performing out there, and it was just a very different thing. Also, Timothy Leary hung out at La Vida in the 1960s. So what was this whole thing about tune in and drop out or whatever it was? I'm sure he dropped a lot when it came to La Vida back in the 1960s for sure. So I'm going to share with you, as we wrap up here, some original negatives I was fortunate enough to be able to acquire a few years ago. I'm wondering if Edward Cochins did these because they look very similar in terms of the writing on them, as well as the types of images. And so I have about 20 or 22 of these, and I'm going to share about a third of them with you. I'm guessing early 1930s is when they were taken, but you can see those eucalyptus trees. In the background is the cafe on this one. The bridge going across to the bathhouse. So the cafe would be on this side behind the photographer, and he's looking eastwards towards Chino. The little sidewalk on the bottom left, part of that is still there, leading from one part of the complex to the other. I think a little bit of the curbing may still be there as well, bridge pilings and all of that. But you wouldn't know because of how overgrown it is today. Some of the earlier little cottages that you could stay in, and in the background, the bathhouse that stood for a long time. There was an explosion, unfortunately, in 1963. A woman lost her leg, an employee, because of a boiler explosion, and they wound up having to knock that bathhouse down. That's looking west towards Brea. So I'm not sure what that thing behind the bridge is, if that is a bathing place or it's a aviary or whatever it might be. Some of these things are a little hard to discern, but that's the bridge going over to the hotel. This is a great one. You can see the playground. All metal. Can't do that anymore. One kid burns himself and there's a $10 million lawsuit, right? That kind of stuff. I am being facetious. Please do not hold me to that. But what you can see towards the middle is the water tank that's still there. And there's another metal tank behind that is still there today. It's obviously changed a lot. But you're looking over that hill would be Olinda Village. And so the little canyon where the water came out of is just tucked behind where you see that tank, obviously. But yeah, the playground's pretty cool thing to see. The hotel lobby. Very interesting. And again, I'm thinking early 1930s. Not sure why a nurse is in the lobby, but I guess they had to do double duty, whatever it may be. So a pretty interesting thing to see, early 30s. And you can look at the room. It looks very interesting. I didn't show it in the slideshow, but I think there may be a postcard of what it looked like in the 60s. A little nicer. No, I did. I think I actually showed that earlier. But in any case, yeah, a little Spartan. But there you are. And my favorite, car driving by as he's taking this picture. Not something you're probably going to print and sell, but other buildings there. I think one of those signs was warning people about the hot temperature of the springs and all that, which is interesting because today we have warning labels and everything, like don't swallow the cap on this, or take cap off before trying to drink, that kind of stuff. But hopefully you've learned a little bit about La Vida. This is not obviously a complete history. I'm sure many of you have a lot of stories about this place. But I was happy to come down and be able to share it. And as Chris said, please feel free to come up and take a gander. This is another great word. Take a gander at the stuff on the table. But thank you very much for coming out today. Appreciate it. Questions? Comments? Concerns? How about in the middle back there? Yeah. Yes.
A lot of mineral hot springs, like I thought Marietta, but Lake Elsinore and tons of them were used for people to come for consumption,
Yeah.
for tuberculosis. And I wondered from some of those pictures, like the one with the nurse, could they have had a section for people trying to take the waters for that?
Yeah, the question was about would TB, tuberculosis, be something that was part of why you would go to a place like this. I didn't see anything in the advertising that mentioned that, but there were a lot of there were a lot of sanitaria and other places out here that were set up to treat TB as early as the 1880s. And how effective some of those were is a question. By the time you get to the 40s, though, there's obviously different ways to treat, and a lot of them got shut down. I did not see any reference to TB specifically in the advertising, but I suppose it's possible. Yes, ma'am.
So, how much water actually comes out from the spring? Do they just use that large storage tank to hold it and then bring it down in? What do they know about
Yeah, so the question's about the water and how much came out. I know there were some articles in the early days that talked about how many gallons were being collected and all that, like you said, in that tank. And there may have been other tanks too. That's the other thing. So I haven't seen anything specific. What we're curious to know is how much there is today. But like I said, the recent sale listing, I think it might still be on the web, talked about the fact that they had drawings and renderings of what you could do out there. So I'm assuming there's enough water to be able to do that. But that'd be interesting to know for sure. But I don't have any details about how much water came out of that. Yes?
What year did they actually close for business?
I am thinking, I don't know, Chris and others, very late 80s, I think because the fire, I think, was 1988. Oh, fire was 80, yeah, but maybe they hung on for a few more years. But then the cafe / roadhouse, and I know they were doing a lot of blues concerts towards the end, and all the bikers hung out there and that kind of stuff. But yeah, later 80s, I think, is when they stopped doing the Mineral Springs part.
I can't really place where in Carbon Canyon this was, but I know where Ichabod's was in Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
Where was this in relation to where Ichabod's was?
As you climb from the regional park, regional park and state park. As you climb up and you get to Olinda Village, which is the top, then you go down, you make a turn to the left, and on the left side, you'll see tall eucalyptus trees, and the tank is still there. So on the north side of the highway. And then another mile and a half probably before you get into Sleepy Hollow, or a mile, something like that. Yeah, of course. Uh-huh.
You mentioned Sully and Miller, and very near where I live in Orange, right off of Santiago Canyon Road, there's a Sully Miller gravel, or was called Sully Miller gravel pit. My dad built the rock crushing system there, but is that the same Sully Miller, I assume?
Well, it's Solly Pugh was one of the partners, Solomon, and then William Miller. I don't think they had anything to do with the gravel side. They were oil drillers, but yeah.
It's a similar name.
It does sound, yeah.
S-U-L-L-Y was the name of the gravel.
However, let's see.
Sully Miller was owned towards his late years by Union Oil Company of California because it was in the asphalt and paving business.
Yeah.
So it's very likely they're the same.
Okay, yeah. That's good to know. Okay, way in the back with the black hat there.
Do you know anything about the ski slope that was there?
I am going to be talking about that in June? Yeah, in June. Mid-June at Chino Hills Historical Society, Ski Villa. I'm actually hoping to get a woman named Ingrid, I just forgot her last name, popped out of my head, that happens sometimes. She's in Corona, and in Norco, and she knows everything about local skiing. Ingrid Wicker. And so, yeah, we'll talk about that out there. That ski slope was, to put it very simply, concrete with plastic needles. And at the bottom, you were supposed to make a turn. And the result was you continued straight and you had road rash. So it lasted about a year. Sports Illustrated did cover it, and there's one in Japan that was kind of the model for it. But if you want to hear more about it, I think it's June 14th in Chino Hills. Chino Hills Historical Society, which, yeah, we'll find a way to get information to you on that. Way back past Stephanie, I'm not taking her question, 'cause I know it's coming. That guy back there. That's a good question. I really wasn't able to find much about it. It seems to me that it probably was operating into the 60s. Yeah. Anybody? Yeah, that was my sense of it, probably into the 60s. And sometimes you can look at the bottles and see the lettering and kind of get an idea of that. But that's my best guess is maybe early to mid 60s, somewhere in there. All right, Stephanie, go ahead.
I should be able to answer this. I'm just wondering, for a day pass, for example, what the cost was, and if that cost was low enough that the average Orange County or Los Angeles person could attend, or was it mostly geared toward the elite?
Yeah, I get the impression this was geared towards probably a middle class type of clientele. The motel was not fancy. A lot of them, some of the hot springs seem to be higher level perhaps than this one. But there's a brochure up there. We probably should look at it. It's going to be 60s, but see what the prices were at that time. That would be good to look at. So we can do that before. Yes, sir, back there.
Yeah, we used to go there in the early 70s. The only thing we ever did, I guess, was the bathhouse. You showed that clip or that slide with the dividers in there. You used to go down in the water, turn it on, drink as much water as you could, get as hot as you could, and then go walk over, and they had tables, and they would wrap you up, and if you were really going for it, they put a towel over your face, too. I never did, because I was just blowing sweat, and it was $3.
$3 in the early 70s. And look, you're still here. So it obviously saved your life. That's good to know. Anybody else? Yes?
As I was coming out of my driveway this evening, I told my neighbor where I was coming and to this talk, and she told me that in the 80s, she went there, and it was a whole day of different baths and a massage for what she told me, $35.
See, you got a great deal. $3 instead of $35. It was maybe 10 years later, but well, the 80s. So you have to think of inflation and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
35 was pretty steep in the 80s.
Well, maybe she had a deluxe package, the special massage and all that stuff. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So I'm a geologist, and we work for the Japanese family that owns the thing, doing the feasibility assessment for there. They were trying to get money from the VA to build a veterans rehab facility.
Okay, interesting.
Apparently, he has several of those in Asia, and
Yes.
they're going to do one here. And it just suddenly went away one day. We never got as far as trying to figure out if there was enough water. I did kind of come up with a theory that the hot spring itself is controlled by a fault that splays off the Whittier Fault, and which about 3 years later had a magnitude 5 earthquake.
Right.
So, I was really sad when that investigation stopped.
Yeah, it was like a 2005 quake or something. Is that about the right time?
Yeah.
That owner was still around, I know, in 2008 because he had to be contacted as we were trying to get Arundo removed there. I mean, the fire burned a lot of it down, which is the only good thing that happened at that fire, and then we're treating it. So I know he was still around not that long ago. But that's interesting. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, first, I live in Brea, and so I took a drive through there at a time when there actually wasn't traffic. And I found the site, because I remember where it was, saw that fencing.
Yeah.
And there was a sign that indicated a corporation with a website.
Yep.
And I looked it up, it didn't say anything about that site, but I got the idea, they owned it, they're in the construction business, so I don't know about that. But yeah, I thought that was it. So if anybody wants to find it, again, if you drive up and down Carbon Canyon and run into a lot of chicken wire fencing, or whatever, you're probably there.
Yeah. And now that you brought that up, he may have sold it in recent years too. But
Okay,
yeah,
there is some corporation there. that
right.
has a website.
And the website did list it for a while, and that's where I found that stuff about
And-
potential
And
springs.
my question though is, so was the water continuously flowing through and they entrapped it in the tubs, or did you just share everybody's diseases?
That's a good question. I'm not very familiar with how they actually got the water down and how they used it and all that. Maybe others do. Do you know?
Yeah, they had that picture you showed with the tubs. They would put fresh water in for each person.
Yep.
So after you were done, they would drain the tub. I don't know if they cleaned it or whatever, but when you came in, they would fill it for you fresh water each time. Yeah, those tubs.
Yeah, and you can see the valve and all of that, so the controls for that. That's interesting. Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
would that matter? The water cured everything.
Well, Byron, that's exactly it. So, yeah. You need the right attitude. That's all you need. Yes.
I lifeguarded there in the 1960s, and we had to cool the water down. We had 2 pools. In the little pool, they cast a bench in it that you could sit on, and then the pool only became about 4 foot deep, and then they built a larger pool. But the little pool, they kept about 96, and the big pool was 84.
Yeah, so 96 degrees and 84 degrees. And you were a lifeguard there.
Yeah.
And-
I watched this was in the restaurant
And when was this?
in the early 60s.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
I was lifeguard in late 60s.
Oh, you were a lifeguard there too?
Yeah.
Very cool.
The interesting thing was that we had these, from LA, these large family groups that come out of LA, they were Hungarians. And they would come in and they would pull in like Friday night, okay? And then they brought all their kids and they brought all their picnic baskets and everything. And they would stay in the hotel. The adults would just get up in the morning, plop in the pool, soak all day long in the pool. The kids were just running around in the other pool, which was the Olympic size, freshwater pool.
Yeah.
And they did it all day long, Saturday, all day long, Sunday, and then they got back in their car Sunday night, and went all the way home.
Yeah, and they're Hungarian. So again, you think of Southerns, Southeastern Europeans being a big audience to this kind of stuff. Very cool. Yeah.
Hi, I grew up in Brea, and I remember one time having the opportunity, I don't know how I was allowed in, but I was there and remember the large pool area. And the same thing that the lifeguards were saying, that the people, I was listening to them and they were not speaking English.
Yeah.
A lot of them were not speaking English.
Yeah, exactly.
Or European.
Right.
And I had always heard that it was like that was where the Hollywood crowd and stuff went, and people who had money and wanted to get away from, or take a break.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's prohibition, go out there and do other things. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes?
I was just gonna say, I looked up MoneyDownLand.com, and it looks like it still might be for sale, and it talks about the Japanese company Kondo, K-O-N.
Yeah, yeah.
And the website's 2019.
How much? Doesn't say?
You can send them an email.
Yeah. If you have to ask. Right? That kind of thing.
That you're showing,
Yeah,
a history about it.
yeah.
So someone might want to still.
I forgot the last name of the owner. I think it might be Hara, but he owned hundreds of acres of land out there. So he was a pretty big property owner.
Harada, Hamada, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It might be Harada, yeah. All right, Chris, I think we're ready to turn it back over to you. Thanks again, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Paul. That was great. Well, thank you again, Paul, and thank you all for coming tonight. And if you are not already a member, please do consider joining our organization. We've been doing this since 1919. We have programs every month except July and August, and then, as you've noticed, history hikes and tours and other events throughout the year. We have a newsletter, other publications, and we have a lot of fun and we learn a lot. So if you are interested in joining for a nominal fee, you can do so tonight even at either the table by the door with Lynn, or at the back table there with the orange tablecloth with Aida. And so stop by, and thank you again for coming tonight. Do help yourself to refreshments, and we will...
Can I share some prices?
We have an update.
1960s sometime, I'm thinking. All right, room rates in the motel, $8 to $14 a night, $48 to $84 weekday, or for the week. Bathhouse, deluxe Roman pool bath with sauna bath, blanket sweat, and shower, $275. 21 baths, $45. And they have other massages and that kind of stuff. Swimming pool rates, adults $125, kids 75 cents. Open 10 to 10, except Sundays, 10 to 8 during the summer season.
Wow, blanket sweat. That really sounds so appealing. I can't wait to pay hard-earned money for that.
And reuse the blanket.
Yeah. In any case, thank you again. Thank you all, and we will see you next month for Eric Plunkett and the Santa Ana Mountains.